Welcome to Raising Financially Fit Families with the Joline Godfrey podcast. I'm your podcast producer, RJ Malik. Joline, how are you doing today?
I am good today, RJ. Good to see you again.
Excellent. You were talking before that you're seeing some sunshine outside. That's always good news.
Yes, it helps my mood considerably.
It helps everyone's mood. I love the sun. So anyway, why don't we then go to you? You introduce today's podcast topic and your guest.
Wonderful. Well, welcome, Barbara. I'm thrilled truly to have you with me today. This is really exciting. And for anyone listening, I want to just remind them that you are the genius behind Women with Capital. And I want to make sure we give you just a minute to tell us a little bit about that and how you came to start it.
Okay. Thank you for asking. Thank you for your support over these many years. So I started Women with Capital, which is a peer learning community where we do bring in experts, because I saw so much power that was stuffed in women's mattresses, with their money. And I thought, if we could look at and use all of that money, what an immense change we could make. So I brought it together. We do cohorts, and it's really about using money as a tool for transformation. It's for progressive women with money, and we're really each other's brain trust. And so we explore everything from the psychology of wealth, which we have talked about a lot and will more today, all different types of values aligned investing, coming up with a philanthropic plan. They're all philanthropic already, but to really up their game and make the difference they want to see in the world.
I and many of us are grateful that you got this off the ground. And particularly now, this is truly an historic point in time to have Women with Capital alive and well. That you have been developing all this time is really fortuitous for all of us. And today I want to talk a little bit more about what that means for the future, not just for the women that are in the cohorts, but for their sons and daughters growing up. Because I think fundamentally what we're looking at is, how do we make a positive impact on the future, and what does that mean for children? I want to start, or just get us started a bit, by saying that it is one of the great paradoxes of wealth, that the universal dream out there is, if I just had enough money, everything would be great in my life. And of course, you and I have both worked with these families for long enough to know that more money brings greater complexity, and it's not the answer to all one's problems. So we'll touch on that some as well. Um, but I think the real question is, what are you hearing from the women in your cohort today? And what are your hopes for the future and where we can go with all of this?
Sure. So, like you, I hear a lot about their worries raising children with entitlement.
Yeah.
They define it in different ways.
Yeah.
And and then also just feeling shame themselves, not feeling a sense of purpose if they're not in the work world, paid work. And so what their modeling is to their children, how to impart values, but most of all, and that's why being in community with like-minded women in similar circumstances is a key in terms of exploring that, because like you said, there is a certain degree of complexity, but being really open, there's a lot of inner conflict, and that's mirrored in the wider world too, in terms of moral judgment around money. And so we really try to demystify it, and the women who come to Women with Capital are coming because they do want to take a leadership role in their family. They want to, it's about integrating, about really looking at their money stories, and most of all, where they would like that to be. And that is something that they pass on to their children.
You know, you make me think, and I haven't thought of this in a while, but you're also talking about identity here. When you describe somebody as,
Yes.
well, not working in the workforce, I think in so many of my male friends, they aren't in a job as it is historically conceived, but they define themselves as leaders and entrepreneurs. They don't think of themselves as not having a job. They do. And I think that helping women embrace new identities, that because these are incredibly entrepreneurial women, many of whom
Yes.
we're talking about, who are responsible for giant events, raising money, doing a lot of things that, men would embrace as, yeah, that's my entrepreneurial work. Are you seeing that? And how do we help women take on I don't know, the mantle of I am powerful. I'm already doing something that matters.
Yes. I do find that women's role outside of paid work is really not even undervalued, dismissed. And like you, I believe that being a philanthropist, being an investor, and using your social capital in the political arena is a really important, valuable form of leadership. But it is a journey for the women that we're talking about to take that on and really identify as someone who is capable and actively making change in the world and serving as a role model to others.
Yeah, but it is a hard thing to get across. Back to community a little bit, I think, is hearing from one another. I'm I did a podcast on aunts not too long ago.
Yes.
And one of the people I talked to before she got on the podcast said something about aunts help us see ourselves, recognize ourselves in a new
Yeah.
way. And I think that's what our communities do. They help us get reflection back so that
Yes.
it's not just in our head that, yeah, okay, maybe I have a little power. Um, but I don't know why we're doing so badly at helping women feel the power they actually have. I'm pretty sure I had already shared this with you, but I did a survey a while back with women. These were highly educated um, women with capital of their own. And when I asked the question on a scale of 10, on a scale of 1 to 10, I feel powerful, 10 being the most powerful, with a relatively small sample, but still a real sample, I could not get women to um, rate themselves above the number 2. And that was a shockingly low sense of, power. It was an anonymous survey. So I feel like what I looked at in the room each time they were filling out the survey, it was like, yes, I've got a group of powerful women here. Clearly, they did not embrace that. What are we going to do to change this? Not, both for them and for the kids they're raising who are growing up.
Right. Well, with both of us focused on money, wealth, and how that moves in people's lives and how it's recognized in society as powerful. And so I think the step towards women embracing their power, that it's not the only way they can have power, but like our mutual friend Marlise Jansen says, you can have power without money, but when you have money, you have power. And so I believe it's providing ideas, support in terms of community, and really educating women. They don't have to know everything. They don't have to be investment managers, but ways that they, like I said, can use it as a tool in the world. And I think when they get their arms around it, I see that it is a sea change. And as I've shared with you, over the last couple of years, these women have come in with a lot of shame, a lot of embarrassment in relatively short time, that they've moved total $150 million. And so using that influence, using it in the nonprofit sector, in their families, talking about money, what they are doing with it, is an extreme transformation. And as one woman said, I went from feeling shame and embarrassment, and that now I have a sense of meaning and purpose. So it's redefining what leadership looks like, and really stepping out of your comfort zone.
Wow. You know, you had said this to me in another way earlier, but you said something that just made it click in a different way a moment ago. I think what you're talking about is helping people shift from wealth as a privilege to wealth as a responsibility. You know, if in fact you have the privilege of significant assets, whether you have earned them yourself or inherited them or married in or whatever that it is, the great challenge is then not to take it for granted, but to do something of impact in some ways. That too is a transformation. I think that sense of how do I do that comes back to this business of community again. And I think it's why many of us have been so frustrated by the disruption of devices that have, the movement to the digital community means kids are not developing social relationships properly. I do think the intrusion of the digital world into our relationships has made it more difficult to embrace a sense of power because we do spend so much time, or certainly the next generation spends so much more time not interacting, but just, being there with a digital friend, not having to deal differently. Um, I'm working on something called Fish, and you and I have talked about this. You've been doing it forever. It's the same thing. But Fish is just the acronym for helping families understand that it's not just about the money, it's about their intellectual, social, and human capital as well. And as families really use that as an operational tool, if you will, everybody in the family is able to participate in thinking about impact.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this coming together finally of understanding that money is more than money, wealth is more than wealth, and we have to transcend the digital is part of what I'm looking at, certainly in working with families and children. Do you hear the women you're talking about discuss any of this in their role as parents or aunts or grandparents? Is this coming up at all?
Yes. And I think one of the barriers to doing it, in terms of talking about all the forms of capital, is just wanting to avoid the subject of wealth and their discomfort and the social mores against it. And, who am I to say? And so that closes off a lot of the avenues to getting into a discussion about values and also why we make certain choices and having an open discussion. First of all, reflecting themselves. And like we talked about, that's a real journey. So it's hard to talk with your kids about values and how your families express them and what they want to, carry forward without looking pretty deeply within yourself. And your book is instrumental in terms of, really guiding people at different stages. I have learned a lot from you and put it into practice with my 16-year-old. And most people don't have guidelines like that. They don't know where to start, which is why your book and your new product is so important.
That's interesting. And, I hadn't thought of it, but this problem of not being able to talk about things, of the shame, actually, I wonder if it's not being amplified right now as people are also getting much more cautious about what they say publicly. There is this concern, I mean, literal concern around security. What is the internet going to come back to me with? What am I going to get punished for? So, just at the moment, we're beginning to understand the importance of speaking out and using voice. There are these external forces basically telling us to shut up. Um, it's a scary time because, of course, we don't want women to shut up. We want them to be using their voice, um, and not just for themselves now, but also for their children. I don't know. Do you think children are aware that their parents or their mothers are in this bind?
Again, if they talk about it, and also with, as with so many other things, if they don't see themselves as having the type of privilege and, like you said, responsibility that goes along with that. So I was just reading a book, Uneasy Street, and it's about this conflict of everyone seeing themselves as middle class, whereas that is skewed, especially when technically the women that we work with are in the top 1% or whatever that is.
Right.
And so I think being transparent about all different types of issues, economic justice, what we want to do about that, and of course women's rights that we both support. And so I have talked with my son, especially because my business is branded Women with Capital. I have put myself out there, and what that means, why we're supporting reproductive rights, and what a scary time it is. So I also try to share and encourage the women that I work with to really share their trajectory, how they came to a sense of, and it's a mix in terms of power and powerlessness, and what they want to do. And because a lot of the time your children don't see what you do, or don't understand it in terms of philanthropy, in terms of angel investing or whatever that is, what I do in my business. So to try to make a point of saying this is what I did today is really important.
Wow. You know, talking to your son, of course, about this is so important. And in some ways, it's just that simple, talking to your sons and daughters about what you do, and framing it as acts that are going to have power. I have to say, even as the forces out there are trying to get us to be more careful about the words we use, and we're learning what's getting taken off the internet in terms of keywords and all of that stuff.
Mhm.
I find myself more rebellious in this stage. I find myself pushing back. Now, I have some ability to do that.
Mhm.
I have some privilege of my own that makes that a little bit safer for me. I'm also a little older, so I'm a little more contrary, and I think that makes it easier too. But I do think it's so important for us to model what we are asking others to
Mhm.
do. I reread Lisa Murkowski's uh, talk the other day in which she said, "We're all afraid." And what I didn't know is the rest of what she said in the next couple of sentences was, I even doubt my own voice and my ability to use my own voice. And I think of Murkowski as one of our most powerful, vocal, impactful senators. And it just ripped my heart out that she's feeling this ambivalence about using her voice. If there was ever a time for women to use their voice as a model for other women and for their kids, seems to me this is it. Um,
Yeah, this is a moment in that the currency is a focus on billionaires. It's a focus on, how money talks and things like that. So if we can provide a counterpoint to that and be like, this is how it can work, this is how you can use it in amazing ways to make a difference, rather than retreating and basically bring to the table what we do have in the face of all these threats. Because, like you said, we do have a certain amount of privilege. I don't take that for granted, especially nowadays. But no, it's not the time for backing off, and to do the work in conjunction with others. Really, as part of a movement, I think is one of the biggest things that you can do.
like me, I bet you have male allies in your world who are remarkable. I certainly do. And I started a while ago to think about how and why we got to a place where doing something for girls or doing something for boys turns us into playing a zero-sum game.
Hmm.
And I've been talking a lot with families lately about this notion that we each have our own individual needs, that are really crafted to who we are individually. And I just feel like it was some sort of surreptitious strategy that got us into putting boys and girls at odds with one another as we went for rights for one gender or kind or place on the gender spectrum, if you will. Somehow it suggested that there was a takeaway for others. I don't yet know how to get away from that easily or well. I'm wondering if there are conversations you're having that you can see will help us transcend that to a place where, boys feel that they're getting what they need as well as girls feeling that they're getting what they need.
Right. I think actually nowadays, most of my members have kids that are between, high school, college, just getting out of college. And I think there is a really different focus, especially in progressive communities, on bringing those barriers down and not focusing so much on, especially with awareness of being non-binary, not focusing so much on those, different roles. But boys as well as girls really having to chart their own course. I know here in my house, we speak a lot about investing in women entrepreneurs and why that's smart and important. And so we always talk about, social implications and financial implications, and we try to be as transparent as possible. And then just to bring to, his attention and other male allies, how little goes with both philanthropy and investing. So, such a limited, I think it's 2%. Some people say 4% to half the population. And yeah, I was glad when my son said that's crazy because we should all think that's crazy.
I know.
The math doesn't math there.
Well, it does make me think I want to do internships in your household, as many as possible for teenage boys. I think that would be a really smart strategy for us all. I want to shift a little bit back to the digital conversation for a moment, just because in the middle of the night last week, I happened to catch, this is embarrassing, a very, very old version of the Ozzie and Harriet show. That gives you
Mhm.
some idea of how old it was. And the particular episode I saw was one in which little Ricky came bounding down the stairs and he yells at his mother, "Hey, Mom, can you teach me the Charleston?" Because he was going to a dance and he needed to be able to dance with girls. And of course, his mother looked at him puzzled and said, "Yes." But in that moment, it hit me that so many of the kids, and even myself, we don't reach out and ask for anybody else to teach us these days because we can go to
Right.
YouTube. Everything is
Mm.
on YouTube. And I thought about the loss of the connection in that moment between little Ricky and his mom. She, of course, was going to be, she would physically touch him. She would spend time talking to him.
Right.
It would be a real development there. YouTube is very handy, but it misses all of that juicy stuff that happens when you connect in real life. Um, I am trying to figure out how we reverse that. I know I feel like the little girl putting her finger in the dike, but I don't know. Does that speak to you in any way? Are you seeing that too?
Yes, very much, and especially since COVID, when kids of a certain age got used to being on their own in front of a computer screen and not seeing them make as many plans. Parents having to facilitate that because kids are in all different places, or private schools in different areas, or so in terms of getting together, and also back to your auntie podcast, really having other adults outside, of the family really interact and spend time with kids. And I know my son really loves that, gets a lot from it. And that takes him away from the computer. But also in terms of what they're seeing, the role models, and especially around money, it is so skewed in terms of what that really looks like. The people that they're following, how they do that. They never show behind the scenes, just like in that show Friends. I'm like, how are they affording that apartment in New York when they seem to not work that much? So yeah, it's definitely an odd view of life. Um, yeah.
You remind me that there is one little short chapter in Raising Financially Fit Kids in which I suggested we trade kids so that kids get
Mm,
exposure in different
yes.
families. And you make me think I need to pull that paragraph out and really expand it,
Yes.
because I think you're right. The more we have contact to real humans,
Right.
better it is. I know that there are companies out there working hard on the humanoids
Hmm.
and brain enhancements with the robots and all of that, but I don't know. I think that I want to sustain the human capital of it all as long as we possibly can.
Yeah.
There's something there. And I do, getting back to women with capital, I think one of the great social innovations of our time, and I mean this sincerely, is the focus on helping women develop their social capital so that it
Yes.
translates to their financial capital. And that's, I think, what Women with Capital is doing so brilliantly. Um, I see we are coming to the end of our time here, and I'd really like to have you come back because this is a rich topic. And if we're going to change the world, we have to keep talking about this subject and really helping women and their families both transform the world on the ground. So I want to thank you for being here today. This was great.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. I love to talk about this. I'd be happy to continue this conversation
This is great.
at any time.
All right. I'm
Thanks,
going to have you
Joline.
back.
Barbara, before you go, how about some contact information?
I have a website,
Okay.
womenwithcapital.com, and that will give you a sense of not only how I work with women, but also there are a lot of quotes on there for people who have been through the program and really showing that transformation and most like what can be. And I think that's exciting, and I hope that your listeners do too if they want to check it out.
Excellent. Joline, your contact information.
So I can be found, RJ, on bounce-10.com. You can also send me a message or a note at Joline, Joline, at bounce-10.com. And I look forward to being here again soon. Thanks for being here.
Excellent, Barbara and Joline. A fascinating conversation. And Joline, we're looking forward to your next podcast. And thank you for listening to today's Raising Financially Fit Families with Joline Godfrey podcast. Please like, follow, and share this podcast with friends and family. Until our next podcast, for Joline Godfrey, I'm RJ Malik.